What if in just 12 weeks you could feel less reactive and snap less with your kids and feel more confident and capable of handling even the toughest moments? That is the goal of my new program called the Regulation Reset. Enrollment is open through February 14th. I can't think of a better Valentine's Day gift for you and your family. It's the support that you deserve. I'll put the link in the show notes. And now on to this week's episode. There is a superpower that every parent has, whether you like it or not. And sometimes it can feel a little more like kryptonite. Today, I'm going to tell you what that is and 3 specific ways that you can use it for good. Welcome to Single Parenting with Connection, Not Perfection, the podcast that honors your messy reality. It's the support you crave without the usual emotional landmines. I'm your host, Dr. Gila, and I promise I will never tell you to just tag your partner in. Before we start, quick reminder. While I am a licensed psychologist and a certified coach, this podcast is not coaching and it's not therapy, and it's not a replacement for medical or psychological advice. It is for educational and informational purposes only. All right, let's dive in. Has your toddler ever casually sworn in public or said another very adulty thing that really sounds exactly like you? Or has your 6-year-old ever commented from the back seat about how fast you're driving or that you didn't fully stop at that stop sign? If you answered yes to this or anything like this, then you know that whether you like it or not, your kids are watching. They're listening and they're watching. And I know that's a lot of responsibility and a little bit of a pain in the butt sometimes, but it is also a really powerful and beautiful gift because it means we have an opportunity to model, to teach, and to help our children learn skills without having to place explicit demands on them or give them specific instructions, especially for kids who are demand avoidant, but even for kids who aren't. This is honestly, it can be one of the best ways to learn. There are actually specific brain cells, neurons called mirror neurons, that are found to actually fire, to activate when you're observing somebody else doing something in a way that's similar to if you were doing it yourself. So there's a brain science neural reason why modeling is actually incredibly powerful. And of course, it's a complicated science that I don't have time to really go into. But the bottom line is that simply being around someone else and observing someone else engaging in an activity can have a powerful effect on your own internal experience. So, on today's episode, I want to talk to you about 3 specific areas where, again, whether you like it or not, you are modeling. And so, we're going to talk about some ways that you can lean into that and really harness that power. And not in a manipulative way of like trying to get your kids to do things that they don't want to do. This is more about leaning into being mindful and intentional around things that really matter, like deep foundational skills that really matter for our kids. And every single one of them is something that also really matters for us, for ourselves. And so when we get more intentional and mindful, the beauty is that it benefits us, even if it doesn't benefit them at all. So, worst case scenario, at a bare minimum, you as a human, as an adult, as the parent, are getting benefit from these actions. And then on top of that, your actions in the moment may influence your children's actions in the moment, or may influence their skill development, bigger picture, longer term. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of where I see this being especially helpful. Okay, so number 1, I wonder if you can guess. Number 1 is something that I believe is a real key foundational skill. I've been talking about it a lot on the podcast and in my emails. I have a whole 12-week program currently open to enrollment focused on this skill. So have you guessed? That's right. It is self-regulation. So If you have ever been riled up, angry, upset, anxious, anything like that, and had someone say to you, calm down, or take a deep breaths, right? It usually does not actually help. It usually, if anything, makes it worse, especially if the person you're saying it to, or if you yourself, the receiver, has a bit of that like independent streak, the demand avoidance streak, the rebellious streak, right? It's going to trigger that don't tell me what to do. And it's also not meeting your needs in that moment. So just telling someone to calm down does not help them calm down. Just telling someone to take deep breaths usually is not an effective way, depending on how you deliver that message. There are some ways that you can deliver that message that might be helpful in certain circumstances, but it often is not helpful and may even make things worse. And the other thing is that I find when I want somebody else that I'm interacting with to calm down and take some deep breaths, very often, if I pause and look inward, I too could use some deep breaths. And so that is always a great place to start. Again, this isn't the answer, the end all be all, the solution. But this is an amazing place to start when you are desperately hoping that the other person calms down. Again, at a bare minimum, it's going to help you in that moment feel more regulated, feel more able to be present, and stay in a place where you can choose how to respond rather than reacting reflexively and often in a way that is damaging. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to two things. One is episode 2 of the podcast, which does go over emotion regulation. And I'm also going to link to the replay of the webinar I recently did, also all about emotion regulation. And both of these tell you a little bit more about the way that I think of emotion regulation, which is that we each have this internal sink inside of us, a metaphorical sink. And when the sink is really full, just a few more drops of water make it overflow. And that overflow state is dysregulation, when you might yell or snap or say things you regret, or maybe withdraw and shut down. When the sink is emptier, the same drops of water that made it overflow in that first scenario, you have room for them and more. And the thing is when our kids are having a really hard time, or really anyone else that we're interacting with, when they are having a hard time, when their sink is overflowing, it overflows into our sink. And that's one of the fastest ways to get an overflowing sink yourself. So the first thing that you can do is to check in with your own sink and do what you can to make space in your sink for the overflow. This is what we mean when we talk about co-regulation, that you have space so that you can support them in becoming more regulated. But in order to do that, you first need to tend to your own sink, as it were. And so the first thing is to take that pause, to take some intentional breaths, to use maybe a mantra or a visual. If you do join my program, the Regulation Reset, this is one of the first things we're going to do is come up with a personalized mantra or visual anchor for you to use in these really tough moments so that you can tend to your own sink and then support your kids in those tough moments. For now, what I want to share is a couple of little examples of how you might want to do this. So, first of all, you can simply pause, place a hand on your chest, and take some nice big breaths. You don't have to say or do anything else. Your child may, in the moment, sense that, and it may, in fact, calm their nervous system in the moment. Now, I'm not going to promise it's not always going to have an effect, but again, at a bare minimum, it's going to help your nervous system and help you stay present and respond in a productive and helpful way in the moment. And then, in addition to potentially helping them in the moment, it's also laying the foundation of them seeing this, especially if they're seeing it over and over again. It's laying a foundation of them seeing this and building this as an expectation and a skill in terms of longer term, bigger picture skill development. You can also narrate. Narration can be an incredibly powerful way to it's like a super boost for your modeling. And again, when you're narrating, it's not just for your kids. So this is not like, let's narrate in order to manipulate my child to do this thing. Narrating actually can make the action even more effective for yourself. So telling yourself, okay, my sink feels really full right now. I'm going to take a couple of breaths. So you can say, if you have explained to your child the sink analogy, which kids love the sink analogy, it's simple enough that they can wrap their heads around it. And one of the things that I love about it is that it separates the sink from the person. So you're not saying that you are super reactive. You're saying your sink is overflowing. And that can reduce, especially for our kids or adults ourselves who are really sensitive to shame, that can take some of that sting away from the shame. And now it becomes not a personal failure, but it becomes about something that's very natural, very understandable, and is a part of who you are, not your whole identity. So you can say, okay, my sink is really full. I need a minute. I'm going to take some breaths. Or you can say something like, I'm having a really hard time listening right now. I need a few breaths. And then take those breaths, right? The simple act of doing the action and then again, narrating it. Now, as with everything, you want to be mindful of your temperament and your child's temperament. So some kids might have a really negative reaction to you narrating some of that. But for most kids, I think it is actually helpful. So that's number one is emotion regulation. And if you're like, well, yeah, that sounds great, but I can't usually stop myself to take those breaths. I'm really struggling with that. You're not alone, first of all. This is really hard stuff. And this is why it is the focus of my upcoming program, the Regulation Reset. Enrollment ends on Saturday. So grab a spot if you're interested. All right. Number two that I want to talk about is growth mindset. So, just like emotion regulation, growth mindset is really a powerful and foundational skill and way of thinking of things that is really going to serve your child well throughout their life and serve you well. If you have a child who tends towards perfectionism and anxiety, this becomes even more important and even more helpful to really be mindful and intentional around. This also overlaps with self-compassion and self-talk. So growth mindset is the idea that we are all learning. We are all constantly growing. We are all a work in progress. And how you talk about yourself and to yourself becomes the template for your child's inner voice. So if every time you make a mistake, you smack yourself in the head and say, "Oh, I'm such an idiot," think about what they are learning, what they are observing, and what they are internalizing. When I make a mistake, I'm an idiot. When I make a mistake, it's something that I need to punish myself for. I need to hit myself for, right? These are things that they're not going to articulate out loud necessarily, but this is what you are modeling. And so my invitation to you is to really be mindful of those reflexive things that you say and do, and to try to intentionally add in some more growth mindset oriented phrasing of things when you do make a mistake or do something that you wish you hadn't done. And again, this isn't just about our kids. Self-concept, self-compassion, self-talk is a huge part of how we take care of our own sinks. If you think about the drain of the sink, if your drain is closed or if it's clogged, no amount of deep breaths is going to keep your sink from being in a very constant state of fullness or overflow. And how we talk to ourselves and bringing more self-compassion to ourselves is a big piece of how we keep that drain nice and open and clear. So even if your child doesn't notice any of this and it has no impact on them, which I find hard to believe, but let's say it doesn't, it is still incredibly worth working on for your own mental health and your own well-being. If you are in the habit of, for example, smacking yourself in the head and saying, "I'm such an idiot," then maybe the work starts with catching yourself when you do that and saying out loud, Okay, I'm not an idiot. That was just a mistake. And now I've learned, and I'm going to try to do it differently. Right. So, narrating, catching yourself, and almost apologizing to yourself, tending to that inner child who you just smacked in the head and called an idiot. And so, tending to that and showing your kids that you're working on that. And this is one of the beauties of modeling growth mindset is you get to not be perfect. Right. You get to make mistakes and name that and show for your kids that that's okay. That's part of being human. So, here are a few examples of things that you might want to do or say. You can, when you notice that you're starting to make threats or respond in ways to your kids that you really don't want to, you can say, okay, I don't like how I'm acting right now. I think I'm feeling way too frustrated. I'm going to take a break and try again in a few minutes. Also, very powerfully is repairing and reconnecting afterwards. Wow, that came out really harsh. I'm willing to bet that didn't feel good when I told you to shut up. I'm so sorry. Next time, I'm going to try to pause before I get to that point of being really frustrated and saying that. And I'm going to try not to say that again. Emphasis on try. You can't promise to not do something again, especially if it is something that you do reflexively, instinctively. It is a well worn pathway. It is something that you're used to doing. This is a work in progress. And so when you repair, when you reconnect, remember, and this is true for our kids also, right? We can't expect anyone to promise to do differently. We can ask them to promise to try their best. That's all you can ask, right? And that's actually one of the phrases we say in our house a lot. All you can do is try, right? That's all I ask is that you try. A couple of other examples. Let's say you burnt dinner, right? You can say, whoops, I burnt dinner. I think I put the temperature up a little too high. Lesson learned. That's one of my favorite phrases. Lesson learned or good to know. Okay, next time I am going to cook that at a lower temperature, right? So, not being really hard on yourself and really modeling this self compassion, modeling the growth mindset. I am going to try my hardest to do better next time. I'm going to try and be as specific as possible instead of do better. Next time, I'm going to plan ahead so that I'm not in such a rush when I'm cooking dinner. Next time, I am going to try to pause and take some breaths before I help you with homework, because that is going to help me help you better, right? So, naming and narrating the things that you want to try to work on and doing it in a way that really is compassionate towards yourself. And again, this is going to have three benefits. One is it's going to calm your own nervous system. It's going to support your own nervous system. It's going to give you the tools to be able to show up and be more present with your kids and with everyone else in your life. And it's going to model for them in the moment and also lay the foundation for them bigger picture of these very important skills. Okay, the third one I want to talk about, I will confess, is my current challenge. And this is screen use and tech use. My child is a tween now. I know that he's of course already begging for a phone. He's going to have a phone at some point in the not too distant future. He has other tech gadgets already. And I know that how I'm using my technology is laying a foundation for what he is observing, what he is expecting to be how one uses tech. So when I look at it first thing in the morning, when I'm checking it in the middle of a conversation or during a commercial break when we're watching TV together, when I take it into the bathroom, which I'm embarrassed to say I do sometimes. So all of these are things that I don't want him to do. And yet here I am doing them and I am modeling for him. So this is something that I'm working on actively. It is something that is definitely a work in progress. I am not doing it perfectly, and I am naming that for him. I am talking about it. I am saying, I really want to stop using my phone at bedtime because I notice it's really hard for me to turn it off And it means I end up going to sleep later than I should and later than I want to and later than is good for my body. And so I'm naming that and telling him that I'm working on it. I'm also trying to narrate out loud. Let's say I do need to do something on my phone because the thing is, we adults and kids, I'm sure, use our phones for pretty much everything. I mean, I feel like phone calls is probably like the 50th most common thing I do with my phone. So if there's something that I need to do, like I need to get the recipe that I'm going to use to cook dinner, then I'm trying to narrate that, especially if I'm with him and I go to do something on my phone. So it's taking me out of being present with him. I am trying to name what it is that I'm doing on there because from the outside, it just looks like you're just disappearing into your phone. And I know how crummy that feels when you're talking to someone and they disappear into their phone. It's a pretty awful feeling. And so maybe we're trying to figure out the plan for tomorrow, and I need to look at my calendar to see what time his appointment is after school. So I might say, let me check my calendar to see what time that is. And then I look at my phone. Again, I am not doing this perfectly, but this is something that I'm trying to do. I'm also trying to put my phone down when we come home and leave it in one spot and not carry it with me everywhere I go in the apartment. And when we are eating at the table, having an actual meal, a sit down meal, I make sure to not have my phone at the table. And that is one of the things that I really value. And my own rules for myself is that I don't have screens at the table when we're eating together. So again, if you are concerned about your child's tech use, which I think most of us are right now, certainly every parent that I've spoken to recently, this is something that's very much on their mind, and it's something that's very much on my mind. I would really encourage you and invite you to start by, again, looking inward. Start by looking at your own practices, your own habits, and thinking about what is it that you want to change? What is it that you want to not change, but maybe explicitly name for your child, right? So maybe you do want to keep the phone in your bedroom because you want it there in case of emergencies, which is something that I've thought about. I keep meaning to look into having a landline for that, but for now, I don't. And so maybe there is a reason why you want the phone in your bedroom. So name that and model for them that you are being thoughtful and intentional about screen use. And that another thing that I name for my child is that the phone is very addictive for me. I have a really hard time not checking it when there's like a few minutes break in something. I have a hard time stopping when I'm playing this puzzle game that I like to play on my phone. And so I'm naming that for him to really model for him and let him know that it's not just that I'm concerned about the addictive nature for him, but I'm concerned about it because I see it in myself. And it's something that I am actively working on. Okay, so there you have it. Emotion regulation, growth mindset / self-talk and self-compassion, and tech use. There are so many more examples. Modeling, again, it's free. It's simple in some ways, but it's not always easy. So be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, and my invitation is to choose one thing. Don't choose all of this, but choose one thing that you're going to try this week. One small message that you want to model for them and also really magnify for yourself. Something that would be nurturing and supportive for yourself, even if it has no effect on your kid. And most likely, it will also affect your kid. I'd love to hear if you do choose something or try something. I'm always reachable at hello@drgilaparenting.com. And one last quick plug for my program. Enrollment does end on Saturday. So if you're at all interested, if you feel like you need to stop snapping as much with your kids, if you're feeling that shame spiral too often, this really is a fantastic way to start reducing that reactivity and building up your skills to be in those tough moments and show up the way that you want to show up and the way that your kids need you to show up. and to not get lost in all those shame spirals because you are doing an amazing job. The links are all in the show notes, and if you're listening to this later, you can still follow those links and I'll make sure they point you towards something awesome. That's it for this episode. I am so glad you found your way here. And remember, even if you're on your own, you don't have to do it alone. You've got this.